Dr.
Great.
Elizabeth Austin, thank you so much for joining me today. This is very exciting. You have a very cool career that I'm sure everybody wants to hear all about. So I don't want to start with the obvious question, which is what does a forensic meteorologist do? Because I've been asked before, what does a broadcast meteorologist do? And it's too hard to answer in one question. So I want to get a little bit of background on you and your education, and have you been doing this forever, or is this something you've taken up in recent years?
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Thanks very much. So my background is all atmospheric science and atmospheric physics, with my bachelor's of science and atmospheric science and my master's and PhD in atmospheric physics. And I started doing, the company I started back in 1994, if you can believe, next year it will be 30 years, which I can't even believe it. I don't know where the time has gone. And I started doing forensic meteorology actually right away because I had heard about it as a graduate student. Another graduate student had been at, it's now NCEI, National Center for Environmental Information, but it was NCDC before, and came out to where I was going to graduate school and mentioned forensic meteorology, the term. And I thought, what is that? And as soon as he told me about it, because of all the data orders they received all the time from attorneys and insurance companies, I thought, oh, I'm going to investigate this. And that's what I did.
You investigated it. Nice. I like
Yes.
that. All right. So it's a very sexy term, but there's a lot of kind of unsexy parts of forensic meteorology, right?
There are. It's sure a lot of report writing, but also I love the investigation of finding out what happened, especially on some of the more complicated cases, such as, for example, large airline accidents, where as a forensic meteorologist, I'm also working with the experts work together to try and piece together what happened, like a metallurgist. There are a lot of forensics doctors to determine who was even flying, because sometimes in the non-commercial ones, aviation accidents, they don't even know who was in what seat. So they reconstruct injuries and determine who was where, along with piloting experts, radar experts looking at the flight path, reconstructing what they can and cannot, depending upon where the flight is, how low or high it is. And then we all give a little presentation of what we found and then talk about how things piece together. And those aha moments when you do, actually, sometimes it's a little fuzzy, but a lot of times there's that aha moment when you realize what happened. And that's, to me, really rewarding.
Can you give me an example of how you would be needed in a criminal case?
You're sure. Criminal cases depend on what kind of accident it was and how they can file it. I'm not an attorney and I'm not quite sure how they do it, but there are, for example, I've worked a double murder death penalty case, and that had to do with lighting conditions of an eyewitness seeing the two assailants entering apparently the house. And then also some of these like major trucking accidents, on the highways and things, cars, trucks, the huge pileups. Those can be tried criminally sometimes, that sort of thing. Sometimes boating accidents can be tried criminally. I'm not an expert on how they decipher which ones can and cannot sometimes, but yeah, that's what happens sometimes. And then you're in criminal court as opposed to civil court.
So a lot of it, I assume, is looking at past weather information. Where are you getting data from?
Oh, that's a good question. It depends on where the case is. We do a lot of international work. And so sometimes that we really have to talk to the weather services in those countries or that region. Also, if it's in the US, it is actually probably the easiest for us because we have so much data and great availability of our data here in the US, and generally it's free, whereas most of the time overseas it's not free, and it can be quite expensive at times depending upon what one wants, especially if you're dealing with multiple countries. Then you have to deal with data from various countries, and it's not usually in the format we are used to. It takes a lot of work to figure it out, but NCEI is one place, Iowa Mesonet, that Iowa State Mesonet, and there's so many, of course, that where we get just oodles of data. We have a list that our guys here have put together of locations, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's huge on where to get what data.
So tell me about your team. You've had this company for a while now, so you've built a team, I assume. What is your company like? What do you all bring something different to the table?
That's a great question. That's we are unique in that way, in that there are about, I guess, 20 of us, and we have a wide variety, and we do work as a team. No one's ever hung out to dry. Everyone is teamwork on everything. But we have different atmospheric scientists and atmospheric physicists with different expertise, like, hurricanes and tropical meteorology, mountain meteorology, kind of that variety. And then we have our graphics expert has his master's in fine arts. So we have MFA, and he does a lot of our graphics and animations. And then we have a remote sensing GIS scientist, and she specializes in all of that. So that's that tangent. Then we have, marketing, internet, IT, and then interns come and go as we need them with projects. So and an aviation expert. And I'm sure there's more I've missed, but that's kind of an overview of what we have.
So can you take me through the process? Because I can imagine it's probably a pretty long process, start to finish, when you get a case. So it starts with a client reaching out and hiring you?
Yes, they reach out and we do a conflict check to see if we have the case or not, or if there's some kind of conflict. And then they take your CV and fee schedule and stuff, and they go to the client and get approval. Sometimes they already have approval. We have so many clients that we just work for, they just immediately just say, we want to hire you, blah, blah, blah. Do you have a conflict? And so they hire us, and sometimes we sit and wait and just don't do anything for a while. It might be the very beginning stages of the case, to where we wait until they say, all right, time to start looking into it, and this is what we need. And they can drag on for a while, sometimes years. Sometimes I'll even write a report, won't hear anything, depending upon what court it's in. Federal cases are different. They have kind of a set deadline, but then I wait a whole year, and all of a sudden I get a phone call, and I can't even exactly remember always what the case was. And then it's heating up again.
So do you ever go to court, or are you mostly just writing reports that are ready?
Oh no, I go to court quite often.
What is that like?
That is so different. First, sometimes you have to give a deposition, and that's the other side, taking your deposition. Sometimes you do that before going to court. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you go right to court. But going to court is a completely different animal. Going to court, I like that I taught at college and university for so many years. It really helped me, because getting very complicated ideas across to breaking it down into a digestible A, B, C, and a conclusion to the jury is not always that easy. And I feel like I have a good knack at that, and I enjoy it. I enjoy teaching, and I enjoy with the jury, or if it's called a bench trial, then you're talking to the judge. There's no jury there, and describing what happened and answering the questions to the judge. And so it's really different. It's almost like theater, except you're dealing with facts, because as an expert witness, you're dealing with facts. But in terms of the whole goings on of walking in and swearing you in, and sometimes they'll even have the judge will have a door where when they go to come in, there's like a big knocker that you take it and they slam it to knock, 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 and the judge comes in. I mean, really, it's kind of like the movies sometimes.
Yeah, it's like weather meets, like SVU or CSI, one of these shows.
Exactly.
Everything wraps up in an hour, but I guess it's not that case in real life.
No.
So I'm sure you have some good stories. Do you have any really kind of crazy off the wall stories or things you've experienced over the years that you just never thought would happen but did?
Well, there are many. One of them was, doing site visits, because sometimes we do site visits. Sometimes it's remote, so we have to reach there by helicopter or airplane or something. And so I find that eerie when you're flying the same route, the same thing in the same sort of, equipment, thinking about what happened in the day and, how thinking about things as the day progresses. But also I did a site visit for that double murder death penalty case I mentioned, and that was eerie. That was very eerie, going there where all these grisly things happened. And but then once I get there, I get to business. I measure things, I look at positions of things, terrain, because it was all lighting conditions, so it had to cloud cover, humidity, all that sort of thing, with and time of day and terrain and the whole gamut of things that I look at. So then once I'm there, then I get into my own mode. But sometimes it's a little eerie when I first arrive to wherever it is.
It sounds like a lot of pressure too to get things right.
Yes, it is. There's a lot on the line, and actually, that's a good thing. One very important thing about forensic anyone as testifying as an expert is staying in your lane. The other side, or even the attorneys that hire us, sometimes will try and pressure us to say things that we don't feel comfortable saying, going out on a limb. And there's some easy examples, like, for example, I'll be asked, Dr. Austin, what could the pilot have seen then on that day? And I'll say, well, I have no idea what the pilot saw or could have seen, but I'm just going to say these are what the conditions were. And so, because I don't know, but they'll try and kind of lead you astray to try and start to get out of your lane. It's hard, especially when one is new at it, to stay in your lane.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you've been doing this for 30 years, you clearly did this quite young. What kind of training did you have in that respect to go into a courtroom and to have that sort of very you know, professional way of handling things? Did you have any sort of training? Did somebody help you learn how to do this?
Now there's more help, more training, some books, some things like that are out there, and that can help. But I did not have any of that, but I had been teaching for a while, because I started teaching when I was in graduate school. So I had that experience and giving talks and presentations, but I knew nothing. I mean, my very first case, I went right to trial, and it was a bench trial with a judge, but it that was eye-opening for me. I didn't even know what to expect, but it went great.
So for anybody who perhaps wants to do this as a career, I would guess it's a little intimidating because it involves, a lot of pressure for one, but also starting your own business, which is a whole other area of training that many of us don't know about. Any advice for somebody new to meteorology, maybe just graduating from school, who wants to become a forensic meteorologist?
I have a lot of advice. One is to eventually get your certified consulting meteorologist, CCM, from the AMS. And the other is to intern while you're a student with a company that does this. And if you didn't get that chance when you're out ready in the job world, instead of launching right out into starting your own business right away, I would recommend working for a small weather company or medium-sized weather company. Get your feet wet, get some experience, make sure you're comfortable with all the aspects of running a company, because there's so much more to it than meets the eye. So, and you can become so caught up in that part of it that you lose track of doing your research and doing your other testifying or work, whatever it is. So it can be hard and daunting if you're just one single person, or even two people that want to partner. It can be difficult.
Yeah, I don't know if it's my age or just the time, but I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people kind of going out on their own, maybe like former broadcasters going out on their own and starting their own companies. And it's interesting. Like I said, I don't know if it's just me or if that's right now that people seem to be doing it more so than ever. Are you seeing more companies out there, more kind of solo people companies?
A lot more. And broadcasters, though, they have a little edge up because people already recognize them and know them. So that they have a leg up in that regard. So for starting their own one man or two man or woman band, they that's a benefit. That's a definite benefit.
Yeah, but you have, of course, time on your side. You've been doing this a long time, which, we were talking about great stories. You've written a book, correct? What is your book about?
It's called Treading on Thin Air, and it is for the general public. And it's all about weather, climate. I talk a lot about forensic meteorology, different cases, but I also talk about very interesting research that I've worked on, field work, different issues, the difficulties of having a family, raising a son and working and everything. It's so I just made it. I was just open about, this is my life and this is what it's been like so far. And so it's kind of like part memoir, part weather, climate, forensic cases.
Well, I bet it's pretty inspirational because, it's for a woman in the 90s going through getting a PhD, starting your own company, and now managing that company. It's kind of a rarity in our field, in a male dominated field. And we're coming up here on Women's History Month next month. Do you have any advice to women, or have you seen a huge transition in the science over the past 30 years for women?
I've seen a huge transition in environmental, atmospheric, hydrologic sciences, but I haven't seen a huge transition. I've seen somewhat in physics, like straight physics, but that still seems to be kind of a male dominated field overall, although there are some great female pure physicists these days. But more women are going out into, meteorology, climate, hydrology, environmental science, oceanography. I have seen a big change. When I first started at UCLA, and it's been the early 80s when I started an undergraduate, and the face of things has changed tremendously. So I used to be the only female in a lot of things, and now it's totally different. It's great. Anyone, male, female, whatever, has a dream about what they want to do, just go for it, because there'll be people along the way that will put up blocks no matter what you're doing, or say things kind of off the cuff at times, like you don't belong in this field, or you'll never, this kind of thing. Just let it wash off your back and move on. If it's something you really love, just keep doing it.
All right, Dr. Austin, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and this was great learning experience.